What happens when a country music star who clawed his way back from addiction and prison sits across from a talk show host who believes she always knows best? What you're about to hear isn't just uncomfortable, it's unforgettable. This is one of the most heated daytime TV moments in recent memory, and it all unfolded in real time. Jelly Roll, the larger-than-life artist covered in tattoos and fueled by redemption, walked onto The View expecting a routine conversation about music, growth, and second chances. But what awaited him wasn't a celebration of transformation, it was a verbal ambush. Sitting across from him was Joy Behar, and within minutes the tone shifted from respectful to ruthless. And here's the question you need to ask yourself as we begin. How far can you push someone who's fought their way back from rock bottom? Before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment with your thoughts. Because once this story unfolds, you're going to have an opinion. The studio lights burned bright that Tuesday morning as Jelly Roll adjusted his black button-down shirt and settled into the iconic chair. The audience buzzed with anticipation, many of them longtime fans who had watched his journey from incarceration to chart-topping success. Whoopi Goldberg had just wrapped up the opening segment, and the atmosphere felt hopeful, even electric. For Jelly Roll, born Jason DeFord, this moment meant everything. He'd been looking forward to the interview for weeks. It was an opportunity to talk about his new album, his work advocating for criminal justice reform, and maybe, just maybe, reach someone who felt trapped by their own past. Then Whoopi leaned in with her familiar warmth. "Our next guest has lived quite a journey," she said with a smile. "From time behind bars to the top of the country charts, please welcome Jelly Roll." The crowd erupted. Jelly Roll waved, his grin genuine and disarming. He had that rare presence, the kind you can't manufacture. Authentic, grounded, real. "Thank you all so much for having me," he said, his deep southern drawl instantly recognizable. "I've been watching this show for years, so being here is honestly surreal." Sarah Haynes kicked things off with easy questions. Music, collaborations, the upcoming tour. Jelly Roll answered with humility and gratitude, never once centering himself as a victim or a hero. He spoke about how music saved his life, how becoming a father forced him to change, how he wanted his platform to be more than fame. And then he leaned forward. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "a lot of people look at me and decide who I am before they hear my story. The tattoos, the past, all of it. But I want folks to know that every single one of us has the ability to change, to grow, to become better than who we used to be." The audience was locked in. This was the Jelly Roll they admired. Honest, vulnerable, unfiltered. When Alyssa Farah Griffin asked about his criminal justice reform efforts, his eyes lit up. He spoke passionately about programs helping former inmates re-enter society. "I've lived it," he said firmly. "I know what it feels like when the world writes you off. Like you'll never be more than your worst mistake. But that's a lie. People can change, if someone's willing to believe in them." And that's when everything changed. Joy Behar, who had been sitting quietly with a tight smile, finally leaned in. Regular viewers knew that look, the one that signals incoming controversy. "Well, that all sounds very inspiring," Joy said, her tone sharp with sarcasm. "But let's be honest. You spent years breaking the law, drugs, prison, and now you're here talking about second chances like you're some authority on rehabilitation?" The room went dead silent. You could feel the shift, the kind that makes your stomach drop. Jelly Roll's smile faded just slightly, but he stayed composed, calm, measured. "I think my experiences give me perspective," he replied evenly. "I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything except my own journey." And right there, in that pause, was the calm before the storm. Because what happened next pushed this conversation to the edge and revealed far more about arrogance, humility, and redemption than anyone in that studio was prepared for. But Jelly Roll wasn't finished. He leaned in slightly, his voice steady but firm. If sharing my story can help even one person avoid the mistakes I made, then it's worth it. Joy, however, wasn't ready to relent. She reclined in her chair, that self-satisfied smirk creeping across her face, the one she always wore when she thought she had a clever point. "But don't you think it's a little convenient?" she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "That now that you're famous and making money, suddenly you're this reformed character? How do we even know this isn't just good PR?" The camera caught Jelly Roll's jaw tighten ever so slightly. His hands, relaxed just moments ago, clenched briefly before he forced himself to relax them. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this sudden hostility. "Joy," he said, his voice carrying a quiet warning only those who knew him would recognize. "I think you're misunderstanding. This isn't PR, this is my life. These aren't talking points. These are my real experiences. This is what shaped me." But Joy wasn't done. Her eyes gleamed with a predatory intensity, the look of someone who smelled conflict and wasn't going to let it go. "I'm just saying," she continued, leaning forward, "it's easy to talk about redemption and second chances when you're sitting pretty with a record deal and sold-out concerts. What about the people you hurt along the way? What about the communities affected by the drug trade you were part of?" Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. The tension in the studio was palpable. Jelly Roll's calm exterior began to crack. His posture shifted. His breathing became more deliberate. There was a fire in his eyes that had been simmering, now boiling over. A fire Joy had just lit. "You want to talk about the people I hurt?" he said, his voice rising, carrying raw intensity. "Let's talk about them. Let's talk about how I've spent every day since getting clean, trying to make amends, trying to do better, using whatever platform I have to help others." Joy pressed on, seemingly oblivious or indifferent to the danger she was stepping into. "But that doesn't undo the damage, does it? That doesn't bring back the lives lost to overdoses, the families torn apart. You can't just sing your way out of that responsibility." And that was it. That was the spark that set Jelly Roll off. Years of learned composure, years of controlling his temper, suddenly gave way under the relentless pressure. The man who had rebuilt himself from the ground up was now standing face to face with someone intent on tearing it all down. The eruption was instantaneous. Jelly Roll shot upright in his chair, sending it rolling back as his 6-foot frame dominated the studio. His voice boomed, resonating with a force that made everyone in the room jump. "Are you kidding me right now?" he roared, his southern accent thickening with emotion. "You think I don't carry that weight every single day? You think I don't know exactly what I've done and who I've hurt? Lady, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." The audience gasped. Cameras swiveled frantically to capture every angle, while producers debated cutting to commercial. Whoopi looked stunned. Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. Alyssa froze in her seat, and yet Joy, as if pleased with her own provocation, leaned back with a smug smile. "There it is," she said, gesturing at Jelly Roll. "The real you, underneath all that redemption talk. Still the same angry criminal, just with better clothes." The studio was dead silent. The only sound was Jelly Roll's heavy breathing as he glared down at her. An expression equal parts fury, disbelief, and something far more dangerous. Then, with a voice low and menacing, he leaned forward, hands planted firmly on the desk. "You want to see the real me?" he said, every word deliberate, almost chilling in its intensity. "The real me spent 3 years in county jail thinking about every person I hurt, every family I damaged, every life I helped destroy. The real me has nightmares about kids who overdosed on drugs I sold. The real me goes to funerals of people I grew up with who didn't make it out like I did." The studio had crossed into uncharted territory, and everyone there knew. This wasn't just an argument. This was a raw, unfiltered glimpse into a life shaped by pain, regret, and the relentless pursuit of redemption. Joy tried to interrupt, But Jelly Roll's voice cut through her words like a blade. "No," he said firmly. "You wanted this conversation, so we're going to have it. You sit up there in your ivory tower passing judgment on people like me. But tell me, what have you ever sacrificed? What have you ever struggled through? You think redemption is some kind of marketing scheme because you've never needed it yourself." The camera zoomed in on Joy, and for the first time, her confidence faltered. The edges of her smug expression were starting to crack. "I'm just asking the hard questions that need to be asked," she said, though her voice no longer carried its previous authority. "Accountable?" Jelly Roll laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You think you're holding me accountable? I hold myself accountable every single day. I work with organizations helping addicts get clean. I visit prisons to talk to kids making the same mistakes I did. I donate to families who've lost loved ones to overdoses. And what exactly are you doing to make the world better besides sitting here tearing people down?" Whoopi finally tried to regain control, but Jelly Roll's gaze was locked on Joy. "You want to know the difference between me and you?" he continued, voice sharp and unyielding. "I admit when I'm wrong. I own my mistakes. You sit here every day pretending to be morally superior. But what you really are is a bully with a microphone?" Joy's face flushed, a mix of anger and disbelief. "How dare you call me a bully? I'm a journalist asking legitimate questions about—" Jelly Roll cut her off, his voice booming again. "About what? About how someone who made mistakes can't possibly change? About how anyone with a criminal past should just disappear? You're not asking questions. You're pushing an agenda. An agenda designed to make people feel small so you can feel bigger." The other hosts exchanged tense glances, unsure whether to intervene. The audience was silent, captivated by the raw emotion unfolding before them. "I've interviewed thousands of people," Joy shot back, raising her voice. "I know how to separate genuine rehabilitation from convenient storytelling. And what I see here is someone who's learned to say the right words to make people forget what they really are." The comment struck Jelly Roll like a punch. His expression shifted from hurt to anger to something resembling pity. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful than before. "What I really am," he said slowly, deliberately, "is a father who wants his daughter to be proud of him. What I really am is someone who knows what rock bottom looks like and climbs out of it every single day. What I really am is a human being who made terrible choices and is spending the rest of his life trying to make up for them." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then his gaze hardened. "What you are, Joy, is someone who gets paid to tear people down on television. Someone who thinks being mean is the same as being smart. Someone who has never had to fight for anything real. So, you don't understand what real change looks like." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jelly Roll raised a hand. "I'm not done. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about yours. How many people have you discouraged from seeking help by making them think society will never accept their redemption? How many second chances have you destroyed with your cynicism? How many families have you kept divided by convincing them people can't change?" The questions hung heavy, and Joy's confident facade was crumbling. She no longer looked like the aggressor. Now she looked like someone who had misjudged her opponent. "You think you're clever," Jelly Roll continued, voice calm but filled with disappointment. "You think you're exposing some kind of fraud, but all you're showing is exactly who you are. Someone who would rather tear others down than build anything themselves." Sarah Haynes tried to interject diplomatically, but both Jelly Roll and Joy ignored her completely. The studio had become a stage for a confrontation far deeper than celebrity drama, a raw, unfiltered clash of experience, morality, and integrity. This had become far more than a television interview. It had turned into a collision of two diametrically opposed philosophies, two completely different views on human nature, redemption, and the possibility of change. I stand by everything I've said, Joy declared, though her voice wavered slightly. People have a right to be skeptical of convenient transformations. Jelly Roll shook his head slowly, sadness flickering across his eyes. You know what the really tragic part is? You could have used this moment to have a real conversation about addiction, criminal justice reform, about helping people rebuild their lives. Instead, you chose cruelty, for no reason other than your own entertainment. For a brief moment, even Joy seemed to pause, considering his words. Then her defenses kicked back in, and she straightened in her chair, defiant once more. Don't lecture me about entertainment, she snapped. This is journalism. Tough questions that others are too afraid to ask. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. Jelly Roll's laugh was bitter, sharp, and void of humor. Tough questions? Is that what you call this? Let me ask you some real tough questions. When was the last time you admitted you were wrong? When was the last time you showed genuine compassion to someone who made mistakes? When was the last time you used your platform to actually help someone, instead of just tearing them down? Joy's mouth opened and closed, producing no words. She hadn't expected the tables to turn, and it was clear she was struggling to regain control of a conversation that had completely slipped from her grasp. That's what I thought, Jelly Roll continued, his voice gaining force. You can dish it out all day, but you can't take it. You attack someone else's character, but the moment someone questions yours, suddenly that's unfair. Whoopi tried once again to restore order. Okay, I think we need to... No, Jelly Roll said firmly, turning toward her. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this needs to be said. I came here in good faith to talk about music and redemption, maybe inspire a few people. Instead, I walked into an ambush by someone who decided before I even sat down that I was a fraud. He turned back to Joy, lowering his voice, but every word carried a weight that demanded attention. You know what's the saddest part? You had a chance to be part of something positive today. You could have asked me about the programs I support, the kids I mentor, the real work being done to help people change their lives. Instead, you chose to be a bully. I am not a bully, Joy protested. For what? Jelly Roll exploded, his composure finally shattering. For getting clean? For turning my life around? For trying to help people avoid the mistakes I made? What exactly am I being held accountable for here? Besides having a past that makes you uncomfortable? The studio was electric with tension. Camera operators captured audience members with hands over their mouths, stunned by the intensity of the confrontation. Producers in the control room debated frantically. Was this a disaster or the most compelling television they'd ever captured? You're being held accountable for profiting off a redemption story while real people are still suffering because of your past, Joy fired back, reclaiming her voice. Profiting? Jelly Roll's voice cracked with raw emotion. You think I'm profiting from this? Every dollar I make, every opportunity I get, comes with the weight of knowing I have to earn it every single day. Do you think I don't know there are families who lost someone to drugs I sold? Do you think I sleep easy at night just because I have a record deal? He leaned over the desk, face inches from hers, voice heavy with pain. I give away more money than most people make in a year to organizations helping addicts. I spend my free time visiting prisons, talking to kids who remind me of myself at that age. I use every platform I have to show people they can change their lives if they're willing to do the work. And you try to interrupt me while I'm telling the truth, but my voice will always be louder than your cynicism. The studio was silent, every word hanging in the air, every viewer frozen in the raw, unfiltered intensity of a confrontation that had transcended entertainment and revealed something far deeper about accountability, redemption, and the human spirit. But you don't want to hear about any of that, do you? Jelly Roll's voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of experience and pain. Because it doesn't fit your narrative. You've already decided who I am, and no evidence will ever change your mind. Evidence? Joy scoffed. What evidence? Some charitable donations and a few prison visits? That's supposed to erase everything you did? The question hit the studio like lightning. Jelly Roll straightened slowly, and when he looked at Joy this time, there was no anger, only something deeper, more profound. No, he said quietly. Nothing can erase what I did. Nothing can bring back the people who died because of my choices. Nothing can undo the families I damaged or the communities I hurt. And I live with that every single day. His voice grew stronger, but it wasn't the anger from before. This was something deeper, something born from reflection and truth. But what you're really asking, he continued, looking around the studio at hosts, audience, and camera operators alike, is whether I deserve forgiveness, whether I deserve redemption, whether someone like me should be allowed to move forward and make amends. And my answer? I don't know if I deserve it. That's not for me to decide. But I do know I'll spend every day of the rest of my life trying to earn it. Joy opened her mouth to reply, but Jelly Roll raised a hand. You want to judge me? Fine. Judge me by what I do from this moment forward. Judge me by the lives I save, the kids I steer away from the path I once walked, the families I help heal. Don't judge me by who I was. Judge me by who I'm becoming. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Joy seemed momentarily speechless, struck by the raw honesty in his words. The camera caught a flicker of something in her expression. Perhaps shame. Perhaps realization. You came at me thinking you were going to expose some kind of fraud, Jelly Roll said, his voice steady and strong. But all you've exposed is your inability to believe that people can change. Your cynicism. Your need to tear others down to feel superior. He straightened his shirt and locked eyes with the camera. To anyone watching this, struggling with addiction, haunted by mistakes, told they'll never be more than their worst moment, hear me, you can change. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But you can change. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Joy made one final attempt. I think you're being overly dramatic. Jelly Roll cut her off. You attacked my character, my motives, my redemption, my right to speak about my own experiences. You tried to tear me down on national television for no reason other than your own entertainment. And when I defended myself, when I showed what real accountability looks like, you call me dramatic? He shook his head in disgust. You know what, Joy? You're exactly the kind of person who makes it harder for people to get help. You're the kind of person who keeps families divided and communities broken. You're the problem, not me. Turning to Whoopi, he added, Thank you for having me on the show. I'm sorry it turned into this, but I will not apologize for defending myself against someone who came at me with nothing but malice and prejudice. The camera lingered on Joy one final time as Jelly Roll prepared to leave. She looked smaller somehow, humbled, like someone who had just realized she'd crossed a line she shouldn't have. Wait, she called out as he began to walk away. We're done here, he said over his shoulder, voice firm and final. I came to talk about redemption and hope. You turned it into an attack. That's on you, not me. As he walked off the set, the audience sat in stunned silence. The other hosts looked shell-shocked, struggling to process what had just unfolded. And Joy sat alone, diminished, confronted by the power of words, accountability, and human resilience. What started as a routine interview had transformed into something far more profound. A clash of philosophies, a lesson in forgiveness, and an unforgettable moment of raw, undeniable truth. So, what do you think? Do people truly deserve second chances? Or was Joy right to be skeptical? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely blow your mind.